We're halfway through the week. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Lee in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Korea made the most gains in its sovereign rating among OECD member countries over the last 10 years, thanks to its fiscal soundness. So, after U.S. President Donald Trump's state visit to Korea yesterday and today, where is the Korea-U.S. FTA headed? These stories and more coming right up. Despite geopolitical risks, Korea has maintained a strong sovereign credit rating. And when looking at the ratings from the three main credit rating agencies, Korea has seen the biggest gains out of all OECD members over the past decade. Our Kim Hae-sung starts us off.
Korea has posted the biggest gain in sovereign ratings among members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development over the past decade. According to the Korea Center for International Finance Wednesday, the three major global credit rating agencies, S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, ranked Korea's sovereign credit rating 14th out of 35 OECD members. Moody's rated Korea's sovereign rating AA2, S&P gave Korea an AA rating, and Fitch gave it an AA- rating. These are the third highest grades on Moody's and S&P's rating scale and the fourth highest for Fitch, placing Korea ahead of China and Japan. Over the last 10 years, Moody's and S&P have upgraded Korea's sovereign rating by 3 notches each, while Fitch has raised it up 1 spot. Only 5 countries, including Turkey, Chile, and Mexico, saw their sovereign ratings upgraded by Moody's over the same period, making Korea the only country in the OECD that has received 3-notch gains from Moody's and S&P. The report attributed the hike to Korea's fiscal soundness and solid economic growth rate that has remained in the 2 to 3% range. OECD countries that suffered from the fiscal crisis, however, saw their sovereign credit ratings go down. Greece saw the biggest downgrade by Moody's with a fall of 13 notches, and Italy, Portugal, Iceland, and Japan all saw their ratings drop due to concerns over their fiscal soundness. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
U.S. President Donald Trump has now embarked to China, but before leaving Korea, he gave a speech to the National Assembly, the first address to Parliament by a sitting U.S. president in nearly a quarter century. His speech mainly centered on North Korea, where he also called on countries, including China and Russia, to fully implement UN Security Council resolutions. Here's our Kim Min-ji with more.
The highly anticipated parliamentary address by U.S. President Donald Trump was relatively reserved, with no surprises. His speech that lasted over half an hour focused mostly on North Korea, which he referred to as a cruel dictatorship. The U.S. president said that the existence of a thriving South Korea threatens the regime's leadership, adding that the more successful Seoul becomes, the more it discredits the dark fantasy of the Kim Jong-un regime.
Considering the misery wrought by the North Korean dictatorship, it is no surprise that it has been forced to take increasingly desperate measures to prevent its people from understanding this brutal contrast.
Trump went on to say that the weapons that Pyongyang possesses are not making the regime safer, but putting it in grave danger. He said that the world cannot tolerate the menace of a rogue regime that threatens nuclear devastation, calling on all countries, including China and Russia, to fully implement UN Security Council resolutions, downgrade diplomatic relations with the regime, and sever all ties of trade and technology. Trump stressed that the international community needs to confront the issue together, saying that the longer they wait, the more the danger grows and less options are available. The U.S. leader also pointed out that America does not seek conflict or confrontation, but will not run from it.
This is a very different administration than the United States has had in the past. Today, I hope I speak not only for our countries, but for all civilized nations when I say to the North, do not underestimate us and do not try us.
However, Trump did say that the U.S. will offer Pyongyang a better path should it cease its threats and dismantle its nuclear program. The U.S. president said that until the North shows its firm will to denuclearize, eyes will be fixed on the regime. Trump's speech was the first at the assembly by a U.S. president in 24 years, the last being made by then-President Bill Clinton back in 1993, and Trump is now the seventh U.S. leader to do so. Some 550 people were present, including South Korea's lawmakers, foreign diplomats, and those invited by the U.S. government. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
A mix of Korean and American business leaders also attended last night's state dinner for President Trump, and they saw the banquet as a golden opportunity to resolve issues over trade between the two countries. Our Eunice Kim tells us more.
At the grand state dinner held at the Blue House late Tuesday, President Moon Jae-in reaffirmed the strength of the South Korea-U.S. alliance. He stressed that the two sides will stand firm against North Korea's provocations and work to bring Pyongyang back to talks on its denuclearization. President Moon said the alliance will ensure peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia, adding that the history of war on the peninsula should never be repeated.
지금도 양국이 함께 피 흘리며 지킨 이 땅의 평화가 다시 위협받고 있지만 한미동맹이 그 위협을 막아내는 힘이 되고 있습니다.
U.S. President Donald Trump responded by saying the alliance, which has grown stronger by withstanding hardships together, is built on a foundation of great friendship.
We have been proud to stand by your side for many decades as an unwavering friend and a loyal ally, and you have never had a time where this ally has been more loyal or stood by your side more than right now.
The state dinner was also a who's who of Korea's business elite. Among those enjoying the evening were SK Group Chair Choi Tae-won, Hanwha Group Chair Kim Seung-yeon, Hanjin Group Patriarch Cho Yang-ho, Vice Chair of LG Group Koo Bon-jun, and Samsung Electronics Chief Executive Yoon Poo-geun. Just a few of the some 120 economic and cultural figures who attended Tuesday's dinner at the traditional Hanok reception hall within the Blue House. From the U.S. side, the VIPs included James Kim, chair of the American Chamber of Commerce in Korea, and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, who sat at the same table as Chung Is-hun, vice chair of Korea's largest automaker Hyundai Motor Group. The seating arrangement allowed an exchange of views and an opportunity to pave the way for the two sides to resolve contentious issues related to the amendment of the South Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, as well as tougher U.S. regulations, including anti-dumping measures imposed on Korean automobile and steel exports. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Now, President Trump's visit also put some focus on one of the most contentious issues between the two countries, including Washington's call to amend the Korea-U.S. FTA. For more on where the trade deal may be headed from here on out, we have our Kim Ji-yeon joining us in the studio today. Hi, Ji-yeon.
Hey, Ji-yeon.
All right, so regarding the tone of Trump's possible remarks on trade, now some are saying that he'll be more diplomatic from here on out, but others are saying that he's likely to put out a more assertive stance.
Right. In recent months, President Donald Trump has gone as far as saying the U.S. should terminate the KORUS FTA deal, saying it's a bad deal and it's a job killer that was widening America's trade deficit. And during his earlier visit to Japan, Trump said there was a need to root out unfair business practices at a meeting with commerce and industry officials there. And the rhetoric by President Trump struck a similar tone during his visit to Korea. On Tuesday, he called the KORUS FTA an unsuccessful deal, while adding Seoul's purchase of more U.S. weapons, including reconnaissance equipment, would help narrow the imbalance in trade. Take a look. With the amendment process set to take place as early as next year, there are many speculations regarding U.S. demands and their impact on Korean industries. There's the possibility that Washington would request an easing of Seoul's regulations on car imports. These may include the lifting of its ban on U.S. motorcycles from entering Korean expressways, or the expansion in the annual cap on auto imports. The current quota stands at 25,000 units that qualify for U.S. standards, but which may not necessarily satisfy Korean standards, which are higher.
All this according to U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in July, who cited them as barriers for U.S. automakers in expanding their share in the Korean market. There's also the possibility that the U.S. could request a tariff hike on Korean automobiles, which was cut from 2.5% to 0% at the start of last year, under the terms of the free trade deal. The Korea Economic Research Institute estimates Asia's fourth largest economy would suffer losses of up to $26.5 billion over the next 5 years if tariff rates are adjusted due to changes in the FTA terms. Another local expert from Yujin Investment and Securities says the level of changes may be more important rather than comparing tariff rates. Contrary to some beliefs, Korea's automobile exports to the U.S. fall sharply on year in 2016 due to shrinking demand even after tariffs were lowered. The country's auto exports to the U.S. tumbled 9.5% last year to around 965,000 units. In addition to this, the expert pointed out that the FTA amendment issue may not impact the auto industry, since Korean and U.S. automakers are not in direct competition, since they focus on different types of car models.
Korean automakers won't be harmed too much if it's just an amendment to the FTA deal, since they are not competing with the US automakers in the global market. But a termination of the deal would be detrimental, since it would lose its price competitiveness compared to Japanese automakers.
Now, other than the auto industry, the steel and agriculture industries have been mentioned as some of the sectors that will see the most changes coming forward.
That's right. The steel industry, which is a major exporter for Korea, is another sector that's facing potential threats. And despite efforts by the World Trade Organization to make steel products tariff-free since 2004, President Trump signed a memorandum ordering the U.S. Commerce Department to launch probe back in April. It calls for an investigation into the impact of steel imports on U.S. defense, invoking a trade law that allows him to adopt import restrictions on grounds of national security. And one expert says it could have been politically motivated rather than for economic reasons.
The reason why Mr. Trump is emphasizing more opening steel market in Korea is generated by his political motive. Actually, U.S. steel industry is almost disappeared. That covers less than 0.1% of the U.S. total GDP. That means they don't have much facilities for producing steels. However, he was elected as a president of the United States from the strong support of the people who live in Rust Belt, formerly the center of U.S. steel industry.
Last but not least, Korea's agriculture industry may see some major changes from possible FTA amendments. Already, U.S. pork exports have doubled, while that of beef have risen 87% since the KORUS deal took effect in 2012. U.S. agricultural and food products currently take up 30% of Korea's total agricultural imports at an estimated $500 million this year alone, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
So what are experts suggesting the Korean government do with all those demands from Washington?
Well, the experts that I've talked to say that Korea needs to actively voice out their opinions and emphasize that the U.S. is not on the losing end of the deal. It needs to stress that Korea's trade surplus with the U.S. has actually waned, contrary to claims made by President Trump. And data from the Korea International Trade Association shows the country's trade surplus in the first 5 months of this year up to May amounted to nearly $6.9 billion, down $4.1 billion from the same period last year.
So got to remember, the U.S. is not on the losing side of the deal.
It's not on the losing deal.
All right. Thank you so much for the report today.
Thank you.
President Moon Jae-in also embarks on another of his Asia trip today. President Moon will visit 3 Southeast Asian nations for a series of bilateral summits and regional forums. Here's our Hwang Ho-jun with details at the Blue House.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in embarks on his 8-day trip to 3 Southeast Asian nations on Wednesday. He will be visiting Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines for bilateral summits and regional forums. His first stop, Jakarta, Indonesia, which is the largest importer of South Korean arms, will be his first ever state visit since taking office. President Moon's bilateral summit with his Indonesian counterpart, Joko Widodo, will take place on Thursday at the presidential palace in Bogor, about 60 kilometers away from the Indonesian capital. In addition to the summit, President Moon will take part in a forum of roughly 300 business leaders from the two countries, dubbed the South Korea-Indonesia Business Roundtable and Summit. It is expected that he'll use the opportunity to introduce his administration's so-called New South policy, which seeks to improve diplomatic and economic ties between Seoul and its Southeast Asian neighbors. On Friday, President Moon will fly over to Da Nang, Vietnam, to attend the 25th Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, where Seoul's chief diplomat is set to introduce his country's key economic policy initiative of people-oriented sustainable growth. The forum will involve officials and leaders from 20 other member economies, including President Trump, who had just visited Seoul on Tuesday. And on the sidelines of the APEC meeting, a bilateral summit is due to be held between President Moon and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. On Sunday, the South Korean leader will head to his final destination, Manila in the Philippines, to attend the East Asia Summit and the 20th ASEAN Plus 3 Heads of Government Summit. A one-on-one with Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang is also expected to take place on the sidelines of the ASEAN Forum. Hwang Ho-jun, Business Daily.
And moving on to our coverage of the markets, we have our markets contributor, Jemmy Kim, joining us on the line. Hello, Jemmy.
Hi.
All right, so tell us how local stocks performed on this Wednesday.
All right, South Korean shares opened lower this morning as investors stayed on the sidelines after U.S. stock markets closed on a bearish note. But foreign and retail buying did boost the index in afternoon trading, and the main index Kospi eventually closed at 2,552.4 points, up 0.27% from yesterday. The tech-heavy Kosdaq hit a yearly high before it closed 1.14% higher at 709.11 points.
Then can you give us a breakdown on some of the market action?
Sure. At one point, the Kospi fell to the 2,540 level as institutional investors turned into net buyers. Electronics and retail sectors were up, while steel, insurance, and telecom shares were down. Number one market cap Samsung Electronics rose 1.18%, and Amur Pacific was up 1.72%. POSCO, however, fell 2.31%, and SK Telecom ended 0.78% lower. Other top market caps like Hyundai Motor ended unchanged.
And what market events do we have lined up for the remainder of this week?
Well, Japan will be announcing its trade balance and machinery orders for September later today. And tomorrow, China will be announcing its producer and consumer price index for October, while the EU is scheduled to announce its economic bulletin. On the same day, the U.S. will announce its initial jobless claims. And on Friday, the U.K. will release its industrial production figures for September. This has been Jemmy Kim for Business Daily.
Korea's money supply grew at a slower pace in September for the fourth consecutive month, rising just 4.6% from the same period last year. According to the Bank of Korea, the country's M2 money supply came to an equivalent of $2.23 trillion in September. Now, M2 is a money supply indicator that includes currency in circulation as well as money market funds and deposits with a maturity of less than 2 years. A central bank official said the trend reflects a shrinking demand for mortgage loans following the government's latest housing market regulations. The official added that the growth rate of money supply is likely to slow even further in the long term. Korea's household loans issued by banks rose 8.6% in October compared to the previous month. The Bank of Korea said $6.2 billion worth of fresh loans were extended last month. Now, this is being attributed to high household spending during the extended Chuseok holiday period last month, along with the emergence of internet-only banks. Mortgages also rose nearly $3 billion from September on a steady rise in group loans. China is redoubling efforts to widen its economic footprint by eyeing more investments in Brazil. Chinese firms already have a large presence in the South American nation, but are looking to tap into even more industries. Our Elliot Kim has this story.
China has been making big investments in Brazil so far this year, and a second wave is expected for 2018. A Brazilian media outlet reported Tuesday that 10 major Chinese firms are already in advanced stages of negotiations for entering into the country. China already has a lot of projects in Brazil, but it's looking to increase the number of companies investing in the country and with a more diverse portfolio. They are reportedly looking to invest in areas such as renewable energy, railroads, and mining. But buyers are becoming more demanding and want the investment profile expanded to health, logistics, and telecommunications, among others. From January through October of this year, Chinese investments in Brazil have totaled nearly $11 billion. The number of mergers and acquisitions made by Chinese firms also jumped from 6 in 2016 to 17 so far this year. Both countries have also agreed to set up a fund worth $20 billion for investments in infrastructure, with China shouldering 75%. China isn't the only country to make inroads into Brazil, as Brasilia has been auctioning off state assets to improve the country's economy. In September, companies from France and Italy, along with China, won bids to acquire operating licenses for 4 hydropower projects run by Brazil's state-run utility firm Samig, a deal worth $4 billion. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
It's hard to imagine that just some 60 years ago, the world's 11th largest economy had been one of the poorest countries in the world. And our Lee Joo-young takes us to a new exhibition that opened that documents the country's unprecedented progress.
This was Korea after the country was ravaged in the aftermath of the Korean War. These pictures of destroyed buildings and bridges are reminders of what the country had once looked like after the war, places that have now transformed into some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Korea. As Korea's economy grew at an unprecedented rate, what observers call the miracle of the Han River, the nation's rate of urbanization rose from what was 34% in 1955 to nearly 92% as of 2015. While Korea's percentage of paved roads was only about 3% some 60 years ago, the figure now increased to more than 92% as of the present day. That's a distance of roughly 100 million kilometers, enough to make 125,000 round trips from Seoul to Busan. A special exhibition that chronicles the country's use and development of its land opened its doors early this month to commemorate the progress. Entrance is free of charge.
This is a place to educate the young and let people know how the country has developed and changed over half a century.
The government said it also plans to use the exhibition to help local companies advance overseas. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.